So I decided when I was putting things together that I want to try not to tell you things that are in the book. And it's not that I deliberately didn't put these things in the book, but I couldn't put everything in it. And the more editing I do and the more people that I come in contact with, the more ideas I realize I need to put into writing about writing process. And I'm thinking about doing another book that's just about the writing process. I don't know when I'm going to do that, but I'm thinking about doing that. So I just want people to take the writing part of it seriously. So many people think, okay, I'm going to write a book, and they sit down and they write something and they say, here's my book. I wrote a book. It's not that easy. There's really more to it. And if you take it seriously and you go step by step, it'll be so much easier for you in the long run. The first thing you need to do is take your idea, crystallize your idea, and your target age group together. You need to know who you're writing the book for, and you need to have a clear idea of what your idea. If you just say, for instance, I want to write a book for first graders. I teach first grade. I love first graders, or I have kids in first grade. That's the age group I'm really attracted to. First thing you need to do is go to the library or go to a bookstore and ask for the most popular books for first graders and read them. I would come home from the library when I decided to do a preschool book. I would come home from the library with a stack of books and read and read and read. So you really get into the thought process and the learning process for that age group. This will help you crystallize your idea too, because if you're gearing your idea to a first grader, you're going to approach it a lot differently than if you're appealing to a third grader. There are very few books that can span both age groups. I have people saying all the time, I'm writing a book for ages 3 to 8 or 3 to 10. That's really tough unless you're rewriting The Night Before Christmas or something like that. The age groups just don't learn the same way. They don't speak the same way. So you have to flush it out in the beginning. I always tell this story. This is a true story. I had a woman send me a manuscript. She was a physician, very bright young lady. She said she had written a book for kindergarten and she wanted me to edit it. So I said, fine, send it to me. Let me take a look at it. It was about Ebola in Africa and people were dying in the story. And I said, no. This is not, you can't do this to kindergarten children, because if you're dealing with something unpleasant like death, you have to leave them with hope. That book left me with no hope. It was just depressing. So you need to know what the kids are thinking, what they like, what they don't like. Think about something that you can do. Once you have your idea, what can you do to make your story a little bit different? No matter what idea you think of, there's probably some other books out there that are similar. There are different ideas that are in vogue at different times. Right now, there are a lot of stories about people being different and getting along, or looking different and getting along. But what can you do to get that idea across in a different way and make your book stand out? Maybe having music along with it. CDs are passé, so instead of a CD, you can do a QR code and have a link to some place where you have a song to go with your story. You can have a pop-up in the book. You can have something that comes with the book, maybe a doll or something, but something that you can do. And in the story itself, maybe if you write the story about a different type of character, maybe your characters are animals, maybe the animals telling the story about being different is a different take on being different. So think about something that you can do that will make your book stand out. Sometimes it's the illustrations, the crocheted illustrations. For instance, okay, help me with the name. Rachel, I'm sorry. Rachel, if you're there, I'm sorry. I was going to say Rebecca, but Rachel's illustrations are so unique because she's actually crocheting her characters and then taking pictures of them for her illustrations. That's very unique. That's very, very catchy. So think about something. Decide whether or not you want your book to rhyme. People love rhyming books. Children love rhyming books. But if you have a story to tell, make sure you can tell your story in the rhyme. You must be able to get your story across. Sometimes if there's a lot to say in a story, There aren't the right words to rhyme to make the story understandable. So the story gets lost. So only rhyme if you can still tell a story. It is a rhyming book, but remember, it's a storybook. So don't let your story get lost. And don't worry in the beginning about your title at all. Don't worry about that. It'll come. A lot of times I get books to edit and they don't have a title, and the author will say, "Can you help me?" And I always say, wait, the story will flush the title out. And it does. It always just comes out eventually. So we don't worry about the title in the beginning. I always say, make every word count. It's really important in children's books not to have extra words. And you'll find the best way to keep your word count down is to use fewer words. Does that make sense? And let me give you an example here. If you get, this is the first one is kind of a wordy beginning for a story. This is just the very, very beginning. And in the beginning, you do want to attract attention. So you want something a little bit lively. So the first one, "Good morning," says Dad. "It's time to wake up." "Good morning, Dad," Andrea mumbles sleepily. "Hurry and get dressed. We have to pick up Grandma to go to the fair." "Come on, sleepyhead," says Mom as she peeks in the door. "Breakfast is ready." Should have been Andrea, but it doesn't matter. Andrea slides out of bed, throws on her clothes, and runs to the bathroom to brush her teeth, then scurries downstairs. There is absolutely nothing wrong with that story, but it's much too wordy. And that was 70 words. So another version of that same story, the beginning is, "Wake up, sleepyhead," hollers Dad. "Today is the day we're going to the fair. Breakfast is ready, so I'll see you in the kitchen in 10 minutes. Ready, set, go." Same thing happens. Dad is telling the girl to get up because they're going to the fair in 70 words versus 33 words. So you can start with the wordy ones, and sometimes it's good to do that. Just put everything down that you feel you might want to say, and then cut it back. It's easier to chop than to add. So put everything down, then go through it, look at it, and take out what words you don't need, because every word is essential to the story. Every story must have a beginning, a middle, and an end. Yes, you say, okay, it has a beginning, a middle, and an end. But there's a purpose. There's a function for each section. The beginning of the story is where you introduce the main character and the situation. Now, in the one we just talked about, "Good morning, get out of bed," that one, we know in the beginning that we know who the character is, sleepyhead Andrea, and we know that the situation is they're going to the fair. So that's what the beginning needs to do, set the stage. I always say it's your once upon a time, where old stories were once upon a time there was a little girl, named Goldilocks. This is where you do that, okay? Okay, we'll do the three and then have them separated out. The middle is where you use the characters to develop the situation. That's where the storyline develops. And you'll see in the example in a second, I'll develop a story for you. And in the end is where the issue is resolved. You tie it up neatly and the story is resolved. It's very important with children to leave them hopeful at the end. So if it's a bad situation, fix it at the end. Don't leave them hanging. Don't leave them worrying about what happened to so-and-so. Don't leave them with somebody dying and sadness at the end. Leave them with hope. Okay, this is where I wrote a little story. I think I did this live last time. I wrote it. So in the beginning, we're going to describe the character. And also remember, because it's a picture book, you don't have to say everything about the character because the illustration will tell part of it. You need to say enough to give the feeling behind the character, that the mannerisms and the facial expressions can be done by the illustrator. So you don't have to say there was a frown on her face. The illustrator will show there was a frown on her face, okay? So this is just a little example, and it's so cute that I think I might write the story someday. But anyway, any of you like it, you can write it. These aren't all the exact words. This is what the beginning of the story would be. Goldie is a lively little fish who loves to swim and do loop-de-loops in the water. Stay in the shallow water, her mom reminds her. Don't go near the big ocean. Now that sets the stage. You know that there's a little fish that loves to swim. You see some situation building because her mom is saying, don't go near the big ocean. So this is a perfect example of meeting the character and learning what the situation is. And then we go on to the middle. This is an example of what's happening in the situation. Goldie and her friend Trudy Turtle decide to go exploring. They travel a bit too far from home. They are horrified to see a huge pile of plastic bottles and junk. Goldie's bathing suit gets caught on a piece of plastic. Trudy is frantically pulling on Goldie while searching in her backpack for something she can use to free her friend. So all of this is developed with more words, becomes the situation. So this is the middle of the story. This is the situation. Now, do I have you on pins and needles? Can you wait to see what happens to Goldie? Let's go to the end. Trudy, who we just found out was searching in her backpack, finds a pair of scissors in her backpack. Luckily, she frees Goldie and the two of them swim home. They are horrified at what they saw. And that's all the plastic in the ocean that they saw. And as an ending, to tie it all together in some hopeful way, how can people be so thoughtless, is what they're thinking. They become little fish activists and they post signs in the ocean saying, beware of the plastic ocean and stop dumping trash and things like that. So the message is, don't dump your trash. It was told through this little fish and her turtle friend, and it wraps the story up in a perfect little bow. I always say make an outline for your book before you get started. That's an outline, a basic outline. A beginning, a middle, and end is all you need to have for your basic outline for your book. And then the rest gets filled in. I guess a lot of you have heard people say show, don't tell. A lot of people don't really understand what it means. It doesn't necessarily mean put it in the illustration, don't use the words. It just means using flat descriptions is telling. Just flat descriptions. Amy was sad when she couldn't find her dog. That's flat. Amy was sad she couldn't find her dog. Showing is using descriptive words to create a picture. For instance, the tears were running down Amy's face as she looked for Floppy. Doesn't that tell you that she's sad? Instead of the flat, Amy was sad, it paints a picture in your head when you say tears were running down her face as she looked for her dog. So you want to paint a picture with the words. And have a few other examples. Telling is saying Mommy baked a cake. Showing would be descriptive language. The smell of baking filled the air. Amy knew it was Mommy's cinnamon rolls, the ones with gooey vanilla icing. Do you see the difference between just flatly saying Mommy baked a cake and using descriptive words to paint a picture in the kids' minds? Another one is, you could say the house was spooky. That's flat. Now, this is a little bit wordy, but I actually used something very similar to this in a book recently, and it was very popular. And it was a young child book, so they do love spooky things. They do like ghost stories and scary things. So instead of the house was spooky, we said the floor squeaked as they entered. The house was completely dark except for a tiny sliver of moonlight shining through the ragged curtains. The house smelled like Grandma's attic and the dust made him cough. Do you see the difference between the flat language and the descriptive language? That's showing versus telling. It can also refer to the use of illustrations, using the illustrations to tell a lot more about your story. In The Knot Fairy, which was my first book, I have the fairy who tangles your hair in knots. And in the different pages, as the fairy comes and goes, you see in every page something else that has been tangled that isn't mentioned in the story at all. So in one, you see that there are knots and tangles, her shoes are tied together. And another one, you see that the cat's tail has a knot in it. So we use the illustrations to add a lot of detail and add things that we don't say in the story. I don't say in the story. And she also tied a knot in the cat's tail. Instead, the illustrator put that there. So the illustrations work hand in hand to tell their half of the story. Any questions about showing and telling? Yes.
How do you balance between those two, between using showing language and trying to keep your word count down to a point?
I always suggest writing it all, and then we'll bring it down. Okay. Once you have it all there, it's easier to go back and say, okay, well, we've said enough. We can take out the second line. You really don't need 2 lines in a row that say something about her dress. Take one out, for instance. Okay.
Something I just thought of, because I'm kind of cutting out words right now for my own stuff, is if you keep your original with all your words in it, it actually might be interesting for your illustrator to get a better feel for what you're looking for in the story, possibly.
You can do that. You can turn the original into illustration notes, because it's important to sit down with the illustrator and describe each character and go over each scene and describe what you want to see happening in that screen. So if you want to tell the illustrator where this takes place, are they in the house? What's in the room if they're in the house? There's a lot you can say about a character when you see them in their bedroom, for instance, and see what's in there. I guess we can talk about that when we do illustrations. Okay, dialogue. A children's story most of the time needs dialogue. It's really boring to narrate a story. When you get to the 4, 5, and 6-year-olds, they're ready for some dialogue. For the younger ones, not so much, because they're just starting to read, and you can say, see the ball is bouncing, and it's just, there's no dialogue because there's not a whole lot happening. But once there's some action, you need characters that are talking about the action. And it actually gives the reader an insight into the character without saying she was a happy little girl. You can have the girl say, oh, Mommy, I'm so glad this is happening. This is so exciting. Whatever it is, if the character saying it in an exciting way is better than you saying there was an excited character. Okay? And it also defines the relationship between characters. A discussion between a brother and a sister is quite interesting. In one book that we just did, there's a little bit of sassiness that goes on between 2 kids talking, and you want to get just the right amount of sassiness between them without them being rude. And you can do that with the words. You can't really do that without the dialogue. You can say she was a little bit sassy. With the dialogue, you can say things like, well, I'm certainly not going to do what you're telling me to do, which is something a sister would say to her brother. So you really do need the dialogue, and it really helps the story move along. You don't want the characters just chattering, leave out the filler. You don't want them discussing what they did in school today. Just leave that out. But if they have one main thing that they need to talk about, let them talk about that. Let them have a conversation. And this is a way to differentiate between your characters, because they wouldn't sound the same. You can give the sister in a book a completely different character personality than her brother, which we just did recently in a book. Yeah, let's go on to the next one. These are dialogue tags, and this gives you added description. Same sentence. It's time for me to go home, Ben said. That's not the same as, it's time for me to go home, Ben shouted. I should have put an exclamation mark. It's time for me to go home. Okay, by using the dialogue tags at the end, shouted versus said, you change the meaning of the story. It's time for me to go home, Ben asked. The same sentence, but the tag is different. And there are lists of dialogue tags that you can use. Ben said, Ben exclaimed, Ben shouted, Ben yelled, Ben hollered. But don't use them all, because the story gets kind of cluttered if you use said and then hollered and then yelled and then shouted. No, keep it simple. And then there are adverbial phrases after the dialogue. Do you remember what an adverb is? Well, these are adverbial phrases. For instance, okay, I'll get to the for instance when we get to, okay. It's time for me to go home, Jenny said quietly, tears in her eyes. That's an adverbial phrase. Quietly is the adverb. It's time for me to go home, Jenny said quietly, tears in her eyes. That says a lot. That says so much just in the tag. It's time for me to go home. You could say, Jenny was sad. She said it quietly. She had tears in her eyes because she didn't want to go home. Yeah, jabber, jabber. But this just says so much with one tag. You can use the same sentence in another way. It's time for me to go home, Jenny shouted, picking up the little frog and running to find her brother. So do you see how you can change the meaning of the same sentence with just the tag at the end? And see, look how much it says about her relationship with her brother and finding the frog, just in that one little sentence. So you don't have to say any more than that. That delivers it all. You just want to make sure your words sound the way children talk. I always prefer simple sentences. I don't like to use semicolons and long sentences with lots of commas. Simple sentences, because young children learn better that way. Simple action, simple sentences, and make everything the characters say be there for a reason. Don't give them chit chat. One thing I like to do in children's books, if possible, is bring them into present tense. If you write everything in past tense, the children are a little less part of the story. When you write it in present tense and things are happening in real time, they're right there with you. It can be a lot more exciting. So if possible, keep the story in present tense for the most part. You don't have to worry with children's books about talking about the past and then talking about the present, because children live in the here and now. They only understand the here and now. So talking about the past doesn't go over with them. They don't get it. They don't remember a past. And talking about the future doesn't mean anything to them. So when you wouldn't say something in a story about, well, and then when he grew to be a man, and then go on with your story, you've lost them. They can't grasp the concept of a child becoming a man, and now who you're talking about. So just keep it in the here and now.
Bobbie, what do you think about, because going back to a story that I had submitted to you a while ago and cleaning it up, and it's kind of like fairy tale, once upon a time, long, long ago, this happened. And I know there are a lot of fairy tale things like that. How do you feel about those types of stories versus, would you rewrite something and really look at it more as a present tense thing?
Well, it's okay if the whole story takes place then. Once upon a time, there was Goldilocks and the Three Bears, and then you're telling the whole story.
Right.
But if you're relating once upon a time to something that's happening now, that's where they don't get it.
I see. Okay. Got it.
Yeah, we grew up with Once Upon a Time. Everything took place.
I love Once Upon a Time. I feel like we need more fairy tales in this world.
Okay. The success of a picture book, we're talking for the most part about picture books, is the success depends on the pictures. It's really, really important to have pictures that are engaging and that tell their part of the story. And I said a little bit about that, but you have to have the pictures match the words. One of the worst books that I ever read was about Christmas at Grandma's house, and there were pictures on the pages of horses and fields that had nothing to do with this Thanksgiving at Grandma's house, whatever it was. So it was just pretty pictures throughout the book, but it didn't fit the words. And don't have your book illustrated before the editing is done, because until you have a complete story, please don't waste your money on illustrations that might not fit if the story is reworked. Because sometimes you have to rearrange things in a story. Wait until you have the final story before you sit down with an illustrator. And then, like I said, go page by page. This is what I want to see on this page. And I will help you with that. I shouldn't say that because I always say, oh, why did I undertake all this extra work? But I will help you. If I edit your story, I'll help you figure out your illustrations too. And go page by page. Whatever action is happening, that's what the illustration should show.
Yeah, I couldn't resist but throwing some pictures here from my first book. And I just loved, the illustrator did such an amazing job at capturing excitement and what was going on. I just felt like it really shows the movement. And, you know, that's the kind of thing I feel like kids really identify with.
Right. And you see all of those lines that actually show movement. That's important. And sometimes I'll say when I'm working with somebody and helping them plan their illustrations, make sure the illustrator puts the movement lines. He'll know what you're talking about. But that makes a difference because that shows that they're moving.
Yeah.
If you find in your illustrations, when you're planning your illustrations, that there's nothing happening page after page, that the characters are just standing there talking, the story needs to be reworked. Because if there's not enough action to carry the story through, the story's going to fall flat. So the goal is to have children want to turn the page and see what happens next. Memorable characters. The story should really be character driven. It's the character that's the important person in the book. That's what kids will usually remember, the character of the book. Now, the character actually doesn't have to be a person. It can be a big red monster truck.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he's the main character in one of the books that we worked on. But that's what the child will take from that book. That was the main character. Charlotte's Web. I mean, that's a classic one. Heidi. You remember the character. You may not remember the story in Charlotte's Web, but you remember the character. And so you make your character memorable, give your character the look of a unique character and the personality. And if you're writing for whatever age group you're writing for, if you don't have any kids around that are that age group, find some. I know with COVID, it's really tough because normally I would say go to the library on a Saturday when they have their reading story times, and you can find all kinds of kids to talk to and hear how they talk, hear what language they speak. Sometimes you'll be surprised at the way they talk. Sometimes the young ones really are talking in a much more adult way than you would think, and you don't want to make your story sound too babyfied for them. On the other side, you don't want it to be above their heads. So it really is good to interact with them and have conversations and find out, what they're all about.
Yeah, and I added that third character in there, which is from my book. It's my little Labradoodle. And one of the reasons why I added this specific one is because of the emotion. Like you can see the emotion on this little dog who's really insecure, and he's afraid that nobody's going to love him and he's not going to find a family. And so in this picture, when I look at this, I can identify with that character and I care about that character. And so when you put that on the slide, Bobbie, I couldn't help but think, oh, I've got to plop that in because emotions in the illustration make such a difference.
Yes, that's a perfect example. I just moved the pictures of all of us over to the other side so I could see what was there. Yes, poor little thing. Oh my gosh. And just having the reflection that he's looking at in the bowl just adds so much to that illustration.
Yes, it was genius.
Don't let the story become stagnant. That's what we were just saying. It needs action. Ask yourself if there's something happening on every page, or does the whole story take place in the same spot? Now, sometimes it can take place in the same spot. If the story is told through thought bubbles, the action a lot of times is in the thought bubbles.
True.
So a character can be dreaming. I'm thinking about the Dream Beans book that we were working on. Mm-hmm. A character can be sleeping or dreaming, and the action, and that can all be in the same room, but the action within his thought bubble or dream bubble would be where you would see the action changing from page to page. But there needs to be something going forward to make them want to turn the page.
Rachel is asking, will the graphic designer be able to add elements such as movement lines to my photos? So, Rachel, you're the one that's taking pictures, but absolutely, from my experience, you can either have an illustrator go in and add things, or a good graphic designer can absolutely do that for you.
Definitely. Don't rush the process. I know you really want your book to come out yesterday. I know the feeling, but the process has to work out the way the process works out. You can't do it all at once. Don't give yourself an unrealistic deadline and say, this is September 1st. I'm going to have that book in my hands by October 15th. Well, you're not. So don't make yourself crazy. Don't rush the process. Don't sacrifice anything along the way. Wherever you are, sometimes you have to pause at different stages. Maybe the story, the writing just isn't right. Well, don't go on to the next step. Get the writing the way it should be, get help with it, and then go on to the next step. If you run into problems with the illustrator and you're not happy with the first one that you talk to, take your time, talk to somebody else, get it right. Don't settle. It's going to cost you a lot of time, and you're going to put a lot of money into this book and a lot of blood, sweat, and tears, and you want it to be right, so just take your time. If you get stuck at any stage, that's why God created April.
Amen to that. I can
It's
second
my
that.
superpower.
And, if you get stuck in the writing part, I'm always around to help. I can help with the illustration part. Also, I've been through that a number of times myself, so I know what it's like. So just, learn to pace yourself and forgive yourself if you're not exactly where you want to be. It's okay. The deadlines are artificial deadlines. Don't worry about them.
Yeah, so we've got a couple of questions. Jemima is asking, does text in thought bubbles count in the word count? And I'd like to expand on that, Jemima, if you wouldn't mind taking yourself off mute, and I'd like to understand, what is it about word count that is concerning you?
I don't know about in the States, but the golden number is 500 words and under here. And I think my book's actually over that for a few reasons. But I'm just thinking, does that get counted? Like if a character's saying, yikes, what's happening, or something, is that counted in the word count?
No, not unless you're actually doing it comic book style and saying a lot in the bubble. No, that wouldn't count. If you're just putting in a few words here and there, no, that's fine.
Bobbie, do we challenge that norm in this? I've heard a lot of people say you must hit a certain word count. What are your thoughts there?
No, I don't agree, because there's some stories that need to be told in more words. There are some stories that are too wordy. If you're working with a traditional publisher, they'll tell you how many words they want, and they will usually say, what I've been hearing just within the last year is 650 words for a picture book for the 4 to 8 group.
Yeah, that's more generous than here.
But there are some with 700 and 800 words that are really good books there's a reason for all the words that are in there, and they're useful words, and the stories work.
I know that I was worried about word count too, Jemima. I'm definitely over 500, but Bobbie really helped me scale it down to just the ones that were necessary. So, don't sweat it too much. Just, do your best. But those little words here and there, that's, don't sweat it too much, I guess.
That's what a good editor is for. And Bobbie is wonderful at cutting words out, sometimes to my chagrin. Don't fall in love with your words.
Fall in love with your words.
I've heard that so many times with my friend here. The other part of it too is there like we get to decide. Self-publishing is freeing in a lot of ways. We get to decide what matters to us. I've had a couple of books with authors that I've coached where they intentionally said, I want to create a book that I'm going to only have to read one book at bedtime, not two or three. I want a longer book because it'll be the perfect bedtime story. And so they intentionally create it. Now, would a a traditional publisher give them that leeway? Probably not. But this is what the publisher, this self-publisher wanted to do. So we do get to make our own rules, but work with a fantastic editor, and I highly recommend Bobbie. Do a critique if you're not sure if you need to change some things, and she's a perfect sounding board for things like that.
Well, thank you. It's with the advent of self-publishing, I honestly think there are more children's books self-published now than traditionally published. I don't know what the numbers are, but so many of the norms are out the window. So many rules are broken, and I guess they're not really rules anymore, because at one time, a traditional picture book had to have 32 pages. Well, now, because of the different techniques, you can have 24, you can have 38 pages. It's different. So I don't think there are any hard and fast rules about that anymore. I think the rule police are out of here.
Rebecca has a question too. I'd like to let Rebecca come off of mute and ask her question.
Okay, my question is, so I've been reading about picture book writing techniques, and I've read that characters should try to solve the story's problem 3 times. And each time they should come up against different challenges varying in the challenge level, and then eventually they prevail the 3rd time. I wondered if you recommend that framework, and if so, does it always have to be this rule of 3, or could they just come up against 2 different challenges in the story, or 1, or what are your thoughts about that?
I think there's one main situation in the 4 to 8-year-old group. They can only really deal with one situation. You can't really have them solving too many challenges, because they will be bored and sleepy after the first one. So you need to tell your story, the situation, and get out. Get in, tell your story, get out. With the older children, you can do several plots. You can have several plots running at the same time. You can have several individual plots. But with the younger ones, I think they can deal with one situation.
Yeah, and I've heard lots of, story structure and hero's journey, and, throw in a sidekick and make sure you have a villain, and, the 3 times challenging something 3 times and getting closer. That, to me, I agree with you, Bobbie. It's kind of more towards the older age groups.
And even then, there's just so much more leeway these days. If you write a good story, a compelling story that keeps their attention and moves forward, then that's really the important thing.
Yeah. And I'm a big fan of doing research in your particular age group. Go to get your targeted age group and really look at the bestsellers on Amazon. Go talk to librarians and see what are those best-selling books, the beloved books. Are they doing this rule of 3? Is there a pattern that you should pay attention to? But don't let the experts necessarily tell you. Let the people that are buying and they're paying with their wallets, and they're driving these books to bestsellers, let them be your guide as far as research, because things change so much and research really lags behind.
Right. So much is different right now in the book world, and really anything goes as long as it's a good story. I don't think you need to worry about having your 3s in there. The language must be suitable. This goes back to the very, very beginning when we talked about crystallizing your idea, knowing the age group that you want to write for, reading the books for that age group, interacting with children, reading your stories to them, asking for their opinions. And it's all about the children. So you really need to know them and understand them if you're going to write for them. I always recommend focus groups. I think we talked about it last week. I know it's harder now, but if you can gather some kids together in your neighborhood, in a daycare, I don't know where to find kids during a pandemic, but it's harder. Or if you can do a Zoom group, a Zoom meeting with some of the preschools. Read your story to them. At any stage, you can read your story. You can say, kids, close your eyes. I want to read this to you. I don't have any pictures to show you yet, but can you picture a little pink pig with a curly tail? Well, this story is about that pig. And tell them your story and see how they react. You know, ask them for their opinions. You know, if you could change the story, what would you change?
Mm-hmm.
And listen. They're so smart. So that's all you need to know to get started. A lot of it, you know, you'll learn along the way. You'll write something and it won't sound right, and don't be afraid to write it again. Don't fall in love with your words. Sometimes we chop them out.
On this next slide, it's got know your market. And the hint is it's not children. And I took a couple of the I Will Always Love You is a self-published book from a member, from Bree Turns, who was a member of our author work group. God Gave Us You. There's a lot of things out there that, and you can see these more than others, are really targeted toward the adult audience. But you're saying your market is not just children. Are you saying, Bobbie, it's because those are the folks that are buying the books, so you need to speak to them?
Right. It's not the children who go into a bookstore and pick up a book. It's the parents. So you want your book to appeal to the kids and to the parents. I was always under the impression, and I don't know if I read this rule someplace or I made it up myself so many years ago, but I've always said, with a children's book, you have to be able to read the title from 6 feet away. In bookstores and libraries and book fairs, when there were book fairs, children are very attracted to colorful books. And if they can see the title and say, oh, wow, monster truck, yes, red, and they go running toward it. Selling on the internet, you know, a lot of that is lost. There really isn't that contact with the kids. So you're really dealing more with the parents, who are the ones that are shopping on the internet. So it has to be something that will appeal to the parents in behalf of their children, and then will appeal to the children.
And I like your 20 keys to a great story. This is a great opportunity to, I was going to print this out and save it for myself and put it up on my bulletin board.
Yeah, I came up with that. And actually I had 40 and I cut 20 of them out today. You
did it to yourself too? Now I don't feel so bad. Yeah. Half your words were replaced.
I did. I chopped it. Okay. Well, I felt like they were a little bit repetitive after a while.
Mm-hmm.
Just like a story, if you're saying it a second time, you need to take one of them out. A good children's story. So this is a good checklist. It presents a simple and straightforward idea. And again, for the younger children, one simple, straightforward idea is all they can deal with. Off of one simple plot that is clearly developed, uses carefully selected, meaningful words. Now your word count is limited somewhat, so don't use extra words. Pick the ones that are the most meaningful. If you don't use the thesaurus, you should start using one, because if you want to say something about, oh, he was so super excited, I didn't know, blah, 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 go to your thesaurus and type in excited and pick another word that will say a lot more in a meaningful way. Don't be afraid to ask for help from your thesaurus. Kids love humor. They love alliteration. Millie's Little Philly is one that I was just working on today. That kids love things like that. So they love nonsense.
5, offers a theme related to children's needs and understanding.
Yes, it has to be something, and that's similar to the next one. See, I could have taken out one of those. Children need to be able to relate to the situation. If they can't relate to it and see themselves in the situation, it's not going to interest them. A good story depends on action and vivid imagery to carry the story forward. So there has to be something going on. And the action, I don't know if I mentioned this, in the picture should go from left to right. The same way the words go from left to right, the action in the illustration should go from left to right on the page, and then left to right off of the next page to make you want to turn to the next page to see what was happening. Avoid abstract ideas and emotions that they can't deal with. Avoid things like metaphors. You can't say things to the kids like, that really, in a story, you can't say, that really takes the cake. Because saying that means picking up a cake. I had one recently where somebody was describing a child was like a fish out of water. Well, that's to a child, kids are so literal, that means a fish out of water. That takes them out of the story completely. So don't give them anything abstract. Just stick to the facts that they can understand. A good story has strong characters with specific traits that children can relate to. If you're writing a book for autistic children, the characteristics of the autistic characters in the book will be something that those children can relate to. Make your characters relatable. If you're gearing it to just a target group, like the books on autism, then do some research and make sure you know the characteristics that you need to portray. If you're dealing with other children, make your story, if possible, as universal as you can. I like to make my books for everyone. There are children in my books of every color and every nationality, and there's a little boy, a little handicapped boy now that we've added, and I want every child to feel at home in my book. Children accept fanciful ideas without concern for reality. It's okay for horses to talk and for chickens to go to school and whatever, they accept it and it's fine. A good story expresses a tone of joy and innocence. I mean, it's a happy place. The book should be a happy place. You want them to be able to live within that story. They love repetition of words and phrases. They love rhyme. Again, make sure that your story is told if you use rhyme. A good story can take the reader into a different world. You know, kids like to live within the world of the character in the book. They like to become that character. You see little boys reading about Superman or whoever, and then they run around the house thinking that's who they are. They like to become that character. Good story offers illustrations that stimulate children's imaginations, often features animals with human characteristics. See, I could have left that one out too. Is optimistic, always ending with hope for the future, always end on a good note. Children love surprise endings. And it's hard to pull that off, but if you can pull off a good surprise ending, they love that as long as it's something happy. And it's a good story is captivating to allow them to escape into the story. So that's all you have to do when you put your story together. You just have to meet those characteristics and you're all set. The end.
And see, we had a beginning, a middle, and an end.
Yes.
Does anybody have any questions for Bobbie? Anything you would like to, with regard to this presentation? And then when this is over, we will open up the floor for, questions on anything that you guys are struggling with.